enemies that come along with the work that we do. And so, yeah, man, a lot of panting.
Wow, that's a good. Yeah, I recognize how that works. Like a weird one to say because it's like, oh, anti. That's not, that's my word for 2021. But I definitely feel. I mean, when I was reading through this, definitely think the call and for a lot of people this year, especially ending 2020 and saying like, there's nothing here I really can satisfy or really um give me what I'm looking for, and the only thing that really does satisfy me is you. And yeah, I was actually reading yesterday another psalm, I think Psalm 63 it was, and I thought it was interesting because the context for that one is that he was in the desert of Judah, and it's kind of the similar lines where he's like, earnestly I seek you, I thirst for you, my whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. And then he says, because your love is better, my lips will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands, and I will be fully satisfied as with the riches of food. And the context is that he's in the desert of Judah. So I thought it was interesting how David is like, even in his panting or his seeking, or even when he was literally being chased by, Saul and all that, when he was hungry and thirsty, what he wanted more than food and water was to be with God. And I think we've come to a point too, many of us throughout 2020 from things that we've lost, like I mentioned earlier, our 2020 ended crazily. My dad passed from COVID, as maybe probably all of people that maybe that be watching will know because of social media and whatnot. But you end the year and you're like, literally, sometimes there's times where you're like, no food or drink or anything here on earth can satisfy what I'm feeling right now, whether that be, the pain of losing a loved one, the pain, the craziness of not feeling fulfilled in what you're doing, loss of direction, right? There's no really remedy when you look in earth, and that's what David is feeling. Um he's like, yeah, I'm thirsting for you more than I thirst for anything else. And until I read it this morning, that I was like, man, this really resonates with us too, especially if you're a church goer. In verse 4, right? The things I remember as I pour out my soul says, how I used to go to the house of God and under the protection of the mighty one with shouts of joy and praise among the festive throng, right? And I was like, man, that really speaks to us all of 2020 and this year. Many people are like, man, I wish I missed those times when we would just go, and before we had to wear masks, before we had to do that. And he's recalling that for experience. I'm not sure where he's at or why he's not able to do that at this time, but at least for us, we know what's going on. And so for many, even though you've opened, it's not the same as it was before. And I know for many, pastors as well, it's like missing that, even though it's chaotic, you still miss that time that you could come together and sing and not have to like, oh, please wear the mask. Like, oh, come on, can you please maintain this, just to be able to be free as we were before, that we didn't realize that. So I thought that was really applicable to us, how I used to go to the house of God and with the shouts of joy and praise. And I was like, man, that's pretty, we're kind of in that same boat.
Yeah, yeah. Good thoughts. Um, when I read this psalm towards the beginning, immediately that what came to my mind was the image of the deer. Where I live, there's like a ton of deer, literally everywhere. You have to be careful driving at night, just because often families of deer will just like pop out of nowhere crossing the street, and you're gonna have to slam your brakes. You'll see dead deer on the side of the road all the time. So behind my house there is a creek, and it flows from a lake nearby. In the summertime, especially at night, you'll see the deer coming, and drinking from the water that streaming by. But what's cool is often you'll see just a few deer sleeping, but like literally sleeping right next to the stream, on the dry ground, of course. And when I read these verses, like I thought of, yeah, maybe a deer that's looking for rejuvenation, someone that's seeking to get, I guess, to catch their breath. They're thirsty. But I also thought of this deer that comes and, sits by the water and rests because it's cool there. There's shade. It's a source of solitude. It's a place of solace. They can just, get some well-deserved rest. And I think that the psalmist, it seems like their soul is not just in anguish, but it's tired. The person seems to be really looking for God as a presence of rest. And I think that he mentions God's presence, right, a few times throughout the psalm. For the help of His presence, my God, in verse 5. So I don't know. I immediately thought of someone who's looking for rest, someone who is looking for God, not just to rejuvenate, but also God that says, okay, yeah, you can sleep here for a while. You can take a nap. You can take a time out. And I think that that's an important word for us, especially now, because you would think that because of the pandemic, you'd be working less, you'd be stressed out less because you're not at the office or you're not, physically at the church anymore. But no, it's been a stressful time, not just because some of us, like yourself, Seb, have lost loved ones, but just the economic distress, the uncertainty with politics and everything. It's been a very stressful time, and most people's souls are not at rest, even when we're sleeping. Even when we're at bed at night, we're thinking about all the craziness that's happened over the past year and so. So immediately I thought of rest, man. Just being able to go to God and to get rest, not just for our body, but for our soul. Like that's what the psalmist is talking about. He's not even talking about something physical. He's talking about my soul pants for you, God.
Yeah, I've just been, as you were talking, I was just thinking about, kind of everything, with what we've experienced in 2020, what families have experienced, and whether it's economic or your personal, whatever, people losing their jobs, and I feel like what I've been seeing right here, in the beginning portion is this sort of contrast between tears that people cry and then the water of Christ that fills, right? So there's this sort of thing that they're hearing from their tears, right? Where their tears are saying, "Where is your God?" Right? So that's kind of the feeling that we have of, where is God? And it results in this water, this discharge of water from our body, and how that's contrasted with, the water that is flowing from Christ, where, we can bring that condition of our tears and our fears and even this question of where are you, but know that there's this place of safety, this place of calmness. And then also just, seeing that dynamic where our tears can, because it also says in verse 3, my tears have been my food day and night. And how that is the way that people feel like that's the only thing that is relieving some of the pain, is for me to just cry it out or to scream or to shout, but to know that there's still this sort of feeling, this aching, this desire for something that can truly fill us, and seeing that, that can really be filled by God. But there's something that's stopping us from that, and for us to desire that. So, Brian, as you're saying, the word panting, it sounds awkward, but, in essence, there is this sort of liberation that comes along with this panting, that, like there is something that can be filled within that income, so that's just kind of what I was seeing, just this, because I think that's really the experience of so many people. And then also, what Seb was talking about with the, I used to go here, I used to do this, and how there was maybe this desire to return to that. But yet there's a feeling of the opposite, where you are crying yourself to sleep, where you are feeling this emptiness, and, you're looking for something to fill you.
Right. And I like how specific I feel he is when he says, not just like any body of water will do. Like I want streaming, waters, like moving waters. And, it speaks to like, right. It speaks to like, I want fresh water. And he's talking about like this idea of when he comes in contact with God, it's not like I'm filling myself with any whatever, little regular Brita filtered water. No, this is like, straight to the source, like the best water with all the minerals that I need. And that's constantly moving, so it maintains its freshness. I don't know how many of you guys have ever like, had a cup of water and you left it, on your nightstand overnight, and you woke up the next morning, you try to drink some, and it tastes not the same. Does that ever happen? No. Oh, you guys are.
Yes, yes. It's happened before.
I feel like I'm at youth group and you're trying to get, your young people to like respond to something you said. And honestly, like that's what I have to compare with, is like, it's not the same. It doesn't taste the same. It's not as refreshing. It's not as good. But when it comes to, filling yourself with something, filling yourself with God, in the sense of the author here, man, it's fresh water, it's running waters. It's, I think like Gabe was saying, it's just provides rest and safety.
Yeah, recently, I think it was a couple months ago. I watched this show with what's his name, Zac Efron. He kind of like traveled different places on Netflix, and they had an episode on water. And that thing, like, I feel like I can never drink bottled water ever again. But because he kept talking about.
You gotta say that. You gotta say that as soon as I got.
I mean, is that
I was just kidding. That's the bubbly water.
Yeah. But he was talking about, the separation we have from the sources, right? And natural sort of water, and just kind of to that point, like how we're so disconnected. And that's something you see a lot, with food and all these different things, that we're disconnected from the source, right? There's so many different, it goes so many different places before it ever comes to us. And, here just talking about going straight to the source, and how even, in our faith, right? I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here. But really, instead of just coming to the source, coming to the water that we know will fill us, and that is good. So yeah, no bottled water, but.
So like tap water, or?
Yeah. No. Unless your tap water is hooked up to like, one of those alkaline filter, You got to check the pH level, bro. Like.
No, that's interesting to see. That when you said that, about where can I go, I thought it was interesting because I think David's kind of doing that. I guess of the sons of Korah, so maybe not David, but he's kind of like, where can I don't know. We'll see. We will ask in heaven.
The author,
but the author of Psalm 42,
the psalmist.
But it's interesting. The psalmist. Thank you. The psalmist. He's kind of having that question, right? Where can I go to find God? Because he's like, I can't go to the house of God, and I'm, for some reason, I'm not allowed there. So it's interesting that I think many of us, we've had to break that reality that the only place where we find God is on Sabbath mornings, or, when we go to church and at the church. And conversations as pastors too close up for a couple of months or still remain closed, whatever it was, where it's like people were like, how are you going to stop me from coming and meeting with God? And it's like, well, God is not reserved to just a location and a time and place. He's in all places, and you can commune with him. Obviously there's the beauty and the importance of community and fellowship. But I think he's kind of working through that, where even you jump down to verse 8, and even though he's not able to go to the house of God and maybe for the experience of being with others, but he's able to still be comforted. By day, the Lord directs his love. At night, his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. So I think he's kind of going through that journey of, for some reason, the psalmist can't go to the temple or to the church as normal, but he's finding that nothing else satisfies me like God. And I can't go to the normal place that I'm usually going to have a fix of God, but I can find him in my brokenness and in my quiet times, whether at night or day. And that I can find him wherever I am, I think kind of helps him to encourage himself, right? Asking those questions. Why am I downcast? Why am I disturbed? At the end, he's like encouraging himself, hey, just put your hope in God, for I will praise him again, right? So it's interesting. It seems like, if we could be able to contextualize it, people would think that people wrote this during 2020 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
In some way, right? You could be like, man, oh, wow, this pastor really is crying out, or a church member or someone from the community is just saying, hey, there's just so much going on around me that nothing else satisfies me, and I can't do the things that I normally did to bring that peace and comfort and rest that I have. So what's left? What can I do? And that brings a level of desperation that you can kind of see here, where he doesn't really, I mean, he's reminding himself of the goodness of God, but we're not really told that God shows up to him and speaks to him, kind of like Elijah, right? Like when you were speaking, Gabe, I was thinking of that, where we can rest, right? And Elijah runs from this great miracle of the fire coming down with King Ahab and is Jezebel, and then she's like, I'm gonna kill that prophet if that kills me, whatever. And he runs after seeing God's, and God doesn't get mad at him for not standing up, for not doing something right there. Hey, that was your moment for reformation, for change. He literally runs like a little kid, after a fight that he just won. And God, instead of rebuking him, just feeds him and helps him sleep and rest. And then he talks to him. And that's the kind of God that we serve, right? That in our despair and hurt and fear, he addresses us. But first, before talking to us, he allows us to rest so that we don't have that, we've all been in relationships with our family or loved ones or whatever. And when you're not in the right mood, it's not a good time to have the conversation,
Yeah.
So let's wait for a moment. So pretty raw what he's feeling through here that I think we can relate to in various ways.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the context of this psalm is. Maybe, this is one of the sons of Korah writing on behalf of David, when he's not able to go to Jerusalem, to the sanctuary, or rather not the sanctuary, but, to be at the tabernacle. Maybe this is during the exile where no Jews able to go to the sanctuary because they're in Babylon, and they're just thinking, right? They're reminiscing. So I don't know what it is, but it seems like this is like very similar to the experience that most people are having now, unable to go to the place of worship. And notice it's not even just about the sanctuary itself or the temple. Like the psalmist references going over with the multitude, like with the community, essentially. So his mind is not just rejoicing from a personal sense. Like this whole psalm seems to be like very centered on the feeling of that he's having or that she's having. It's individual. Yet the psalmist is mentioning the group of people that he or she was with. They're thinking of being connected to a larger community and reminiscing and missing that. So I think that's important when we analyze just what we're going through as well. Often people like to suffer in silence and suffer in solitude, but there is also like a need somehow, like and you might miss it just by skimming through quickly, but there's a need for community in those moments where being connected to loved ones, being connected to your people will be able to sustain you during the trial or during that time and season of parchness, right? So I thought it was interesting how he's not just thinking about the temple and God's presence, but also being connected to the multitude.
Yeah. I like the argument that he has with himself throughout the psalm, though.
Yeah.
Because I think like the distinction that was brought out between, him and a prophet of God who literally gets to like hear God, or God literally tends to him like with ravens or angels or whatever. For this guy, he's like, yeah, I don't get to see any of that. And I think that it resonates so well with us because I don't know when was the last time, ravens brought you food or an angel spoke directly to you, but, it's been a while for me. And
You've had that happen to you?
No, bro. That was a joke. But that's what I really like about this psalm is the fact that this guy is like reasoning with himself, like, look at all this stuff that's going on around me. Like my life sucks. Like I can't believe I'm going through this. I'm going through such agony. But why are you downcast, Brian? Why are you acting like this? Why are you thinking that? And
why are you complaining?
Exactly. Yeah. So you start like, oh no, God has blessed me this way and that way. And we try to reason with ourselves. But what I like about this guy is like, he doesn't try to reason what's good about his life at that moment. I think that we've been taught that, oh, you have to look at the good things. And it's like, sometimes there aren't any good things to look at. And sometimes the bad things are the things that really have overtaken my life. And I don't have time to sit there and make a list about the pros and cons of my situation. And so I like that the psalmist is just like, no, dude, just remember, man, just believe in God. And that's it. Like, it's not like he gives like specific reasons. He's just like, put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him. And he doesn't give reasons for that. He just says, I'm just going to be hoping in God. But there isn't really like a rational reason for saying, yeah, you should believe in this God because look at all the things he's given you. And I really appreciate that, because I think that's kind of like the wilderness experience that a lot of people are facing today, especially with COVID, is like all these things are going wrong. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, well, at least God blessed me by, not having to pay my student loans this month. It's like, no, like things are like just like going not the best way. And it comes down to being hopeful, as little as that may sound, and as little food to your soul that may be, and as cliche as it's lived out, as be hopeful. That's it.
Yeah. I love that thought, Brian, because throughout the psalm, he says it a couple of times where, it's kind of like he's coming to, he's having this battle between himself, like a battle we often see in church with people who have gone through some kind of traumatic experience. Some church folk who might be well-meaning and have good intentions, will handle trauma by telling people, yo, just move on. God's been good still. Like he's so, good to you. But at those moments, you kind of don't want to hear that. So it seems like the psalmist is going through this like inner struggle with lamenting and then also giving thanks. And I love how he doesn't just like stop lamenting, the psalm ends on a kind of a positive note, but often these psalms don't end on a positive note. It's just a straight up lamentation all throughout. And I love how he is willing to remind himself of like, yeah, God is a help in the time of need, but I need to process these thoughts and this pain and the suffering that I'm going through. I'm reading a book right now by this theologian named Shelley Rambo, and she talks about trauma, and it's called A Theology of Remaining, and how often many people want to rush through the trauma. They just want to go through it without doing reflection and contemplating and really feeling what they're feeling. This is often, seen even in Easter, when we celebrate Passover, we celebrate Resurrection Weekend. We go from Good Friday and we rush to Resurrection Sunday. Like we don't even talk about the Black Sabbath, right? The dark Sabbath where no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Like no one knows if Jesus is going to resurrect. Everyone during that moment of, sunset Friday to sunset Saturday, in their minds, the disciples, their world had ended completely. Their whole entire paradigm had just been shattered. And that's often the experience of people who have gone through some kind of trauma, some kind of loss, painful experience. And the impulse is to rush through it because, this hurts too much. This is too painful. Let me think about only good and positive things. While that might be helpful in a moment, in the long run, it's going to do damage. And so I love how the psalmist is kind of like, you could tell he's kind of tempted to think that way. Like, oh yeah, but why am I crying about this? Why am I, complaining? Why am I whining? But he continues, in his lamentation. And I think that's a great thing to see. Like, it's okay to lament that we're in a pandemic. It's okay that we're sad because our economic situation has totally shifted from positive to negative. It's okay to to lament that, because in essence we're appealing to God's character. We're appealing to his goodness. We're appealing to his sovereignty, that he is able and capable of blessing us. And we're just sad, and we're kind of waiting for the day that he's gonna help us out. So yeah, that's my thought. Like, I love that inner struggle that you mentioned, Brian, the battle of complaining, and then also kind of being thankful.
Yeah, praising, really, because like he doesn't, I mean, God is not doing anything for him at that at the time, So he literally has to, and I think the psalm actually ends on a sour note, because he's still convincing himself. It's not that God came through and showed him the sign. He's still trying to convince himself, like, no, I will still praise him, even though I'm not out of this mess yet. And I like verse 8, because I feel like it's the only like kind of positive note in the psalm, where he says, by day the Lord directs his love, and night his song is with me, and a prayer to the God of my life. And when I read at night his song is with me, I was reminded of a verse that talks about God singing over us, and I had to Google it. I didn't remember where the heck it was found.
I think it's in Micah, maybe, or Zephaniah
3:17. It says, right, the Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you, and his love, he will no longer rebuke you.
Yeah.
He will rejoice over you with singing. And I think the psalmist is kind of like thinking like, no, I'm still going to hope in God, because I know that at this very moment, he's singing songs of love and delight over me. Even though I don't feel that way, even though my situation doesn't look like he is blessing me, yet God is still singing, praising me in a way,
Yeah. Can I read my version? That verse.
Only mine, the Message Bible.
So mine is a New American Standard. So it says, "The Lord will send his goodness in the daytime, and his song will be with me in the night." And that version kind of, for me, it elicits a thought of, in the daytime, that's when, I'm going to get the goodness of God. But in the nighttime, which it seems like his whole experience right now is the nighttime, all he's getting is a song, right? He's not getting the goodness. He's just getting a song. And I think that is important, because the song kind of like might be that which sustains him and kind of carries him and anchors him through the nighttime. And, man, like, I don't need a song right now, God. Like, I need the goodness. So yeah, that portion was pretty interesting.
No, that was beautiful. I love the insight there, Gabe and Brian, and the idea, like you're saying, don't rush the journey or process, and it's okay to be in that in the dumps sometimes. Even Jesus was kind of going through that in the Garden of Gethsemane, just saying, "Hey God, I don't want to go through this, but if it's your will, I'm gonna do it." And I definitely felt that too with with the passing of my dad, and just kind of, thankfully nobody's really come up and say, "Hey, you move on, it's okay, stop crying." Thankfully nobody's been insensitive in that way, which, praise God. But I know obviously we've heard people be like that, and don't cry, because but there is a tension just inside where you're like, okay, like he's feeling here, like he's hopeful, but at the same time it's his reality, and it's just kind of like that balance between, it's just going back and forth, where you're like, oh, my situation sucks and I'm so upset, but then you're like, but I'll, I'm hopeful, and then it's like, but I miss, and then it's like, so it's that tension that I think we live with in this life.
I love that word that you just used, tension, because we often like to, I guess, compartmentalize everything. And, you're either lamenting or you're hoping. You can't do both. But really, Christianity is holding those two things together and living within that tension. And with that tension, I think of Paul in Thessalonians chapter 4, where he's talking about death and resurrection. And he tells, I think in verse 13, like, guys, I don't want you to be ignorant about death and about things to come. And he says, we grieve like those not without hope. Like, essentially, we grieve, but we also hope. And we're doing both at the same exact time.
Right.
And I think this psalm is a lovely, scenario where we see someone who's grieving, but also kind of hoping at the same time.
Yeah. And and I think it's an invitation for people to be okay with it, right? Where I think, like I said, maybe good intentioned people will be like rushing through the grieving or through the heartbreak, or even now, like, hey, we haven't been in normal services for 9-10 months, so move on. This is a new normal. It's like, no, I mean, we miss it. We miss what life used to be, or you miss your whatever's causing you that discomfort and grieving. So it's okay to live in that tension. You don't have to lean one way or another. You can live in that tension, which some days is you're doing better than others. Just like in here, like every other verse, it's kind of like, yeah, and then it's like, oh man, this sucks, and and so it's just the tension that we're living in. But I think which he ends there, right? Kind of not a resolution, but just kind of like his conclusion is like, I'm just gonna hope in God, because that's all I have in this life. So yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, something I've just been thinking about, as you guys have been talking, is like, isn't that in many ways just like that is just the experience. I think because we're so, whether, I don't know if it's the movies or like, we're always looking for the sort of happy ending all the time. Like, we have to get there and then we have succeeded, But I mean, maybe it's not the resolution. Maybe it's the journey to the resolution that is the, the beautiful aspect, right? The thing that is where the hope is found. And because I think there is, and that's something, even I've wrestled with, like, man, if I could just get here, if I can just find a way to no longer be affected by, what has happened, right? Then I'll be good. Then I'll finally have matured, or I'll finally have been. But to shift that on its head and say, well, no, those things are still a part of my experience. Like, they make up, who I am, and it still is something that I'm continuing to work through. But that doesn't mean I don't look forward with optimism, right? Look forward with hope, and not feel right, because I think there's a guilt, right? At least in my faith experience, I've always felt like this guilt of wishing that not ever looking back, right? Because I think there's a verse in Philippians where it talks about never always looking forward, right? Instead of not looking back. But there is some element of looking back that is important, on this journey and that process. So it's those things still affect our life now, and so it's okay to, like we were saying, to live in that tension, and to not necessarily always have to feel guilty or feel like we're not spiritual, we don't, or lacking in faith, or God is against us, right? But there are moments where we feel at odds, as obviously as we know. But it's so liberating to know that is not the reality, that we don't have to be afraid of that.
Yeah, I love that too, because there's also the idea that you're trying to rush through that uncomfortable period, right? And like we're saying, it's not necessarily about the destination, it's more of what you become during this journey and tension. And so many times we're like, we want to get to that final product of ourselves because we live in such a fast pace, or like immediate, you can order something on Amazon and it can get to your door tomorrow, so it's like we want to get through that. Okay, and I've had to struggle that with myself. Okay, I'm grieving. Okay, when will I be back to before my dad passed, right? And before this tension. And it's like, hey, maybe I'll never get to that 100%, and I'll always have to live even more now in this tension of like grieving, and then, okay, I'm doing good. And so it's just like knowing that there's no need, or really, it's not really beneficial for you to try to rush through this. It's just allow it to take its natural course, and for God to guide you through it. But Yeah, the tension, living in the tension. Awesome. Well, any last words here on Psalm 42? The big takeaway. Or maybe we kind of summed it up here. Let's see. Nani had mentioned a couple of things before when Gabe was talking. The Body Keeps the Score is another great book regarding trauma. And let me see. I was going to do this. Maybe that works so we don't cover Gabe's face. And then even in his turmoil, he is actively fighting for hope. And even at the end of the psalm, he is still fighting, but yet not yet where he wants to be. Very active. Great input. All right, Nani, we're going to see when we have you on to preach a message or something. He is still fighting, but not yet where he wants to be. And even in big takeaway, guys.
Yeah, I guess mine is just that that kind of struggle within the text itself, the whole thing. I don't have a particular verse, but the big picture, I guess, of the psalm is like an up and down kind of movement that seems a whole lot like what it looks like to be a Christian even now. You know, you have moments of highs and then you have the really low part. But I guess I do have a verse. It's the which verse is that? I'm not sure which number, but he says, "Deep calls to deep," verse 7. Deep calls to deep at the sound of your waterfalls. All your breakers, your waves have passed over me. So I think of, you know, that image that it looks like he's underwater and he's deep, right? You know, he's in this deep, you know, darkness and deep loneliness, and his deep experience calls out to, you know, the deepness of God, you know, his fullness and his goodness, and vice versa. God calls out to us from, you know, the deepness of his goodness to the deepness of our despair and, you know, pain. So I love that verse. That probably is the cool thing for me that stands out from this text.
I like that.
Yeah. So okay. For me, it's verse. You know, the first verse, simply because that's just one of those verses that I memorized when I was younger. I was like, oh, I think this is gonna be my favorite verse, and I think it's still like one of the only verses that I know by memory. Yeah, I know I'm a pastor, but I don't memorize a bunch of stuff. I know where some stuff is, and I can, you know,
Google
paraphrase it for you. But I'm not gonna memorize the entire Bible. It's on my phone.
Sad. That's a good confession. I do the same thing. I could Google it too.
You're like, man, how does that verse
what
go?
was it that this says? Oh, here it is. You know, just like you guys don't remember, you know, your mother's phone number, so don't judge.
Oh,
Right.
Your Facebook password. That's more of the, you know, the boomer generation.
Right. You get like 5 different Facebooks and 10 Instagram accounts because they don't remember what the passwords were. Yeah. You can't write Jesus the password, and you know, I'm kidding. Anyway, so my takeaway is just the first verse. It's a verse I've carried with me since forever, and I think that it really describes my personal experience as far as my relationship to God. And what it comes down to is that nowhere in the text does it appear that he has stopped panting, you know, that he has found it. And so in a way, I feel like I'm always trying to find like a better, like, I guess, connection to the source of God. And even if I'm panting, even if I'm like searching for him constantly, um, I look at this verse and it shows me that that relationship, that connection that God has with me doesn't change. when I'm completely satisfied with streaming waters versus where I'm like panting. I'm like, yo, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm in it deep, like Gabe was saying, like, and I don't really see a way out of this. And that connection, that relationship that God has, already reestablished for me, um,
Mm-hmm.
hasn't changed. And so being able to pant and at the same time say that you are praiseworthy, even though I'm going through the struggle, I think that's what really, really speaks to me because
Wow.
you, I mean, honestly, if we were true to ourselves, we'd never really stop struggling as far as like, spiritually and emotionally. Um, that that fight's always going to be there.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a reminder that even when the fight is there, God is there, even if it's just in a song. Um, I think that it's, yeah, that's my takeaway.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's just this realization that well, one, just the Psalms in general, how there's space in the Bible for these feelings, right? These emotions, this moment of grief, right? Whatever it is, that you can still bring that to God and be in a process of solving it, be in a process of sorting it all out and
Mm.
sifting through it,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
still, see the streams of water, right? See this like it's okay. You don't always have to see it, but to know
Wow.
that it's still there, and to know that God isn't, upset at you for not constantly seeing it, but rather that He is continuing trying to point you there. And I think that's part of, for me, that's a takeaway for me, even just now in my season, and then even for others, just knowing that that stream is still there, but man, maybe we may not always see it, but God isn't, upset at us about it. He's listening to us when we're like, dude, why you forgot about me, or why aren't you listening to me, or why is it that I'm crying myself to sleep, whatever that is, but to know that, that's still there. And for us, maybe the process is for us to consistently know that. But that's just a beautiful reminder for me, of that. And I think that's why God always said, I'm with you. He always gave that reminder. Jesus always like that before He left. The last thing He said is, "I'm going to be with you." Even to the end of the age, which I think was specific language to say, like, even when it feels like I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to let you know that I'm there with you.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, man. That's great, man. I love that you mentioned that because you have this psalm in the Bible and other instances like this that this is perfectly normal. Like there's nothing wrong with you feeling this way and being a
Yeah.
Christian. Like just because you
Mm.
found Jesus, you found God doesn't mean that you forego like all these different experiences. This is part of it. And so I think that many times we get really discouraged and we leave maybe religion altogether simply because we go through these moments where we didn't know or no one really taught us or showed us that, hey, it's going to get tough.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to seem like God's there for you. So yeah, I love that you mentioned that, Stephen.
Yeah. And when we contemplate just, the cross, Jesus had the same exact experience, where he felt abandoned and alone, and he cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" So I love how you mentioned that, Stephen, we might not see the streams, but just knowing that the stream exists,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
kind of is enough. You might not see it, you might not be there, but you can imagine it.
Yeah.
That's pretty deep thought.
All right, C.S.
Yeah.
Lewis over here.
No, that's good, Gabe. I mean, even Jesus, like, even though he was like, yo, why have you forsaken me? Then says, into you I commit my spirit. And it's like, what was there a realization somewhere there where God came through? No,
Right.
Yeah.
there wasn't. And so same thing.
Yeah. What was the aha moment, right? If he's on was there like a,
Yeah.
No, that's good. That reminds me of like I forget where it's at, but I probably have to Google it. But
Yeah.
probably Hebrews, where it says that that Jesus endured the cross, and for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, and still went through with everything. So yeah, I want to read here what Nani, and I'll share my thought here. But Nani said, "Ooh, covered Gabe again. Sorry, Gabe. Maybe if I change it like this."
It's all good, bro.
He's always covered. Wow, that's
Either way, he's covered.
Make the square smaller and you're good, you know?
yeah. Let me see. Yeah, that's funny.
There it
What's
is.
important is what's written, not my face.
We want to see your reaction. No, the psalmist has some serious self-talk, preaching to himself in this chapter, and I think that today I think that's what we have to do daily. That hopeful self-talk, and fight for the joyful experience of hope and freedom, whether it will come or to pass now or in the future. Daily hard work. Yeah, that's very good. Kind of like what Stephen was saying, right? Of just like, even though you're not at the streams of water yet, imagining, and I mean, in visualizing yourself, what it will be like when you're finally there, because it is there. It's just you're not there at that moment. So, but yeah, my big takeaway is just, I mean, obviously what you guys are saying, all that, and just for me, it's just comforting, as kind of touching what Brian was saying, that it's okay to feel like this and that you're not alone. You know, it's not like everyone in the Bible was perfect and never had doubts and questions or moments of despair, but you know, some of the greats in the Bible had these very trying moments, and yet God is still patient with them, merciful, providing them with rest, promising these streams of water. And even though you're not there yet, it's okay, and God is with you, right? So I think it's a word for us at this time where there's so much going on around us, and hopefully we're the thing we focus on the most is God, and the thing we turn our hearts to the most is God, because we will be brought to that streams of water that we're so thirsting for, that will heal our souls and bodies. So awesome. I love it. I love that too, that deep calls to deep.
Yeah.
God matches your reality in some way. No matter how dark or deep you go, he's going to be there. So,
yeah.
There's a Bethel song, I think, too, with that, but I'll have to Google it too, because I don't know it off the top of my head. But awesome, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Nani, for participating. Everyone else, much love. We'll be back. And like Brian said, we're just going to call it Friday mornings now. Friday mornings instead of Friday at 10 a.m. Just
11:59 a.m. We still made it, man. We made it on time.
Yeah, we do want to do a shout out to Google.
Shout out to Google.
We're team big tech. And no,
waiting on an Amazon package too.
That's fast, actually. That's hard. It's hard. You want to be like, yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. But always want to plug in our Las Doñas Hablan, so check them out on Instagram, doing great work over there. And Los Doños here, Los Jefes. So.
Los Doños.
All right, guys. We'll have a great weekend. We'll talk, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.